Today on the Family Answer Man, we're answering your questions about PKs, or pastor's kids, from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man program. I'm David Orgis, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man. This time is designed to answer questions commonly asked both in the counseling and church settings, and our goal is to answer general questions from a biblical worldview through the lens of our collective years of experience and education to help you, our listeners, have a stronger, healthier, happier family. Now, today we want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air. Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding area. And the people at Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats, located at 35770 LA Highway 16 in Denham Springs, both for underwriting today's show. Now, our show is not a therapy session, and this is not specific advice to your situation. Mental health is a very serious issue. Family dynamics can also be very complicated. So, for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. We do hope that this episode of the Family Answer Man, though, will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, happier family. Well, Dr. Mark, we are talking about PKs today.
Yes.
So some people are probably familiar with that term, PKs, PK syndrome.
Yeah.
It's a very unique situation.
Yeah.
PK stands for pastor's kids, or kids that are raised up and grow up in ministry homes, and specifically pastors' homes.
Right.
A lot of times there's some stereotypes around it, but a lot of times the dynamics that happen with that are pretty unique because of the increased level of scrutiny that comes from being raised as the pastor is the leader of the church.
Right.
And so you not only have your life as a child, but you have also this it's almost being raised in a fishbowl.
Well, yeah, that's so true. And the reality is most of our listening audience, has pastors in their lives, I would hope. And so most of them can identify with the pastor's family to some degree, meaning they know the pastor, they know the wife, they know the children. And the problem is that in many cases, that we'll look at this question that's about to come, is that expectations are placed many times on pastors' spouses and pastors' children that is far beyond the norm. In other words, the expectation of what these children should be saying and doing, the expectation of what the wife should be saying or doing, is not an expectation put on anyone else. And it's that expectation that many times the children or the spouse cannot live up to. And so now there's this sense of failure. There's this sense of disappointment. There's this sense of we have let down God or the church or our parent or our spouse because we didn't live up to the expectations of the congregation.
That's a pretty big burden.
It's a burden that most people cannot bear. Most people don't want to bear, but yet and still they put that on the pastor's family, on the pastor sometimes himself, on the pastor's kids. And this is a burden they didn't ask for necessarily. In other words, they just want to live a life that is real, that is hopeful, that is meaningful, that has purpose, that is serving in nature. But the reality is not every pastor, not every pastor's wife, not every pastor's kid is going to get it right 100% of the time. And so, but the thing is, if you don't get it right 100% of the time, there is going to be someone out there who is willing and ready to pounce on that. And here's why. So they can feel better about themselves.
Yeah.
So they can, if the pastor has a flaw, if the pastor's wife has a flaw, then what begins to happen is they pounce on that because now I feel better about myself because, I know I got my flaws. And so maybe they have their flaws, and because they have their flaws and I've got my flaws, I don't feel so bad about me.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a lot of that happens, unfortunately, in church setting and in various other settings as well.
Yeah, and that level of external expectations, it's already hard enough growing up, going through your childhood and your teen years, developing, trying to establish a sense of identity and purpose and find your way in life, but then to have an unsolicited external expectation, definitely takes it in a new direction.
Yeah, and it's expectations, like I said, that no one could really live up to.
Yeah.
The old joke back in seminary days was the church is looking for a pastor who's young, about 30 years old, with 25 years experience, with 3 PhDs, the perfect wife, and 2.5 kids. Well, good luck finding that person.
Right. Also, by the way, we need him to volunteer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she needs to know how to play Bach and Beethoven.
That's right.
With ease.
Yep. So that's a great segue that leads into our question on the Family Answer Man today. Right. So the question that we have written in says, I've been raised in church all my life. Mm-hmm. Growing up, we had the pastor's family over for dinner and fellowship every Sunday after church. Today, my husband and I have the pastor's family over frequently. Why does it seem that the pastor's kids, the PKs, are always the worst behaved kids in church?
Well, there are some points and principles we need to ponder in no particular order. Number one, in most cases, I'll argue that the pastor's kids are really no different than any other child, meaning simply this. They want to have friends. They want to have fun. They want to have their hobbies. They want to fit in. They want to discover life. They want to, play games. They have the same interests, the same concerns, the same questions, the same temptations as everybody else. But the expectations, as we said earlier, of the pastor's children are sometimes so great, and the expectations of their behavior are so great, and they're so often amplified that when the pastor's child does not live up, again, to the expectation of someone, what begins to happen is that now they're seeming as if they're worse than other children, when in reality they're really not.
Yeah.
In other words, many in the church have this magical belief that the pastor's family is immune from difficulties, from problems, from dissension, and from rebellion. And the truth is they're not immune. As Chuck Swindoll said, look, we have to take out the garbage just like everybody else. We get sick like everybody else. We get tempted like everybody else. We have, problems and disagreements like everybody else. And so the truth is the pastor's family is not immune. But because they live, as you said a while ago, in the fishbowl, they have to portray an image of unity. Now, the problem with that is this. Portraying this image of unity is important and it's valuable and has its place. But what begins to happen is that for many pastors' family, because they're portraying this semblance of unity, this family unity, what begins to happen is the problems that happen in the pastor's family often do not get resolved.
Oh.
You see what I'm saying? So in other words, we're going to look like we're getting along. We're going to look like everybody's happy. We're going to look like that we, have worked through whatever, when the reality is they haven't.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that these problems never get resolved and they only grow worse and worse and worse. And these are the same problems that plague every family.
Well, yeah, unresolved issues
exactly.
at home are it's a poison to the family.
Yeah, I mean, financial problems or, problems with, the child's homework or school behavior or whatever. And so because the pastor's family has to portray, in many cases, this image, they never really get into the root, if you will, of what's going on and how this problem can be resolved. So number one, expectations are higher. Number two, there's no resolution, or rarely is a resolution of a problem. And so not keeping things real in most pastors' family is one of the great concerns and problems. There's pastors that I've met over the years who've been asked the question, so how did you manage? How did you raise good kids? Or how did you raise such a successful family, in a large ministry? And many of them will say this: we just kept it real. When we messed up, we confessed it. When we, did something that was not, the will of God, we came back and we owned it. If we, did something that, we felt like, hey, this could have been handled differently, we admitted it and we worked through it. We owned our faults. We owned our problems. We owned our shortcomings. We owned, the lies that we told, we owned up to it. And so we kept things real. And because we kept it real, our kids realized that our faith, our family, our hope was really genuine. Because we kept it real.
Yeah.
It wasn't a game we played. It wasn't an image we just kind of put up there. We just made it clear that, hey, we own the fact that we struggled in this area, or we had this problem, or this never worked out for us.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it can be easy to just, like you've alluded to, assume that pastors and their families don't have issues.
Right.
I think anybody that's gone to church on a regular basis before has experienced what it's like
Yeah.
to have a different car ride to church
Oh, yeah.
and have a different face than when you walk in the doors.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And pastors aren't immune from that, and their families aren't as well.
Something else you're hearing that you didn't hear, 25, 35, 45 years ago is that when you hear from the pulpit pastors admitting to going to seek counseling.
Yeah.
I mean, Andy Stanley has said many times that he pastors the second largest church in America, how helpful his counselor was in helping him work through some of the issues with his dad, the famous Charles Stanley. And both of these are men of God. Both of these have, great ministries. Both of these men, are very well loved and respected by their congregation and by their peers. And so they're great men of God. But they will tell you, we had to go through counseling. We had to work things out. We had to overcome our differences. We had to overcome the expectations that we put on each other and that others put on us. So next, I would say this, the demands of a pastor, kind of going into this, the demands of a pastor is far greater than, I would say, 99% of most church members or parishioners understand.
So unpack that.
Yeah, meaning this, most parishioners, most people in the congregation, they only see the finished product of what a pastor does. They don't see all the planning and all the preparation and all the proofing that has to happen. All they see is the performance. And so what happens is that many pastors often have to be the personal chaplain of many in their congregation. Because many parishioners are so demanding of their pastor, they want him to be their personal chaplain, and that's not easy to do. Or maybe their personal therapist in some cases. Or maybe the pastor also has to be the community theologian. If there's a question about end times, if there's a question about, the war in Ukraine, if there's a question about, what's going on, with politics, many times the pastors will be bombarded with calls or emails about what does the Bible say about this or that, which is wonderful, but that takes a lot of time and energy as you become the community theologian. The pastor also is often the worship leader. He's also, or she's also the main teacher, in the church. The pastor is also the funeral director, the wedding coordinator, the spiritual advisor, the community prayer leader. Most pastors who are listening to us will acknowledge the fact or testify to the fact that how many ball games were they called to, or how many family reunions, or how many school reunions, or how many, community meetings has the pastor been called to come open up with prayer, which is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
It's a great thing that, the community, event wants to be opened up with prayer, but at 7:00 on Saturday morning, really? Okay. When most pastors would love to get a little sleep in on Saturday morning, but they go out there, they put their suit and tie on, they go out there at 7 a.m., they open up and they go home. And so the point simply is this, is that pastors are called to do these things. The spiritual advisor, did I mention the wedding coordinator? Okay. They're the wedding coordinator. They're also on call 24/7. Most people will hesitate calling maybe their accountant at 2:00 in the morning for a financial problem. Right. Yeah. But if there was an accident, there was an illness, if there was a death, most people have no problem, and this is okay, but calling their pastor at 2 a.m. Then on top of all of that, the pastor is expected to live out this almost perfect life. And so if the pastor, is having a bad day, or if the pastor is not as polite, or if the pastor doesn't want to talk to somebody in the middle of the store about the book of Revelation, then what happens is they're seen as not being sympathetic or kind. Also, too, the pastors are expected to chase and bring back every member who's disgruntled. They're expected to chase down. They're expected to reach out to every person who visits. They're expected to attend to every special need and interest. They're expected to be there for every surgery, every special event, and every procedure, and preach the most eloquent, the most biblically based, and the newest sermon one has ever heard in their life.
Now, you talk about all those things, right? And as people are listening, they may be a little overloaded saying, wow, you know what? Pastors might do a lot. You haven't even talked about their role at home.
So I'm getting to that. So in other words, the pastor, by many standards, are expected to do almost the impossible. And so what happens is this, and God bless the pastors who are out there because most of them do great work. But many pastors, here's the deal, they try to meet these needs that we just declared. They try. Many pastors try to do this, all these things that we said, and many things that perhaps we didn't say, much to the sacrifice of their family. Mm. And that's where things begin to break down.
Yeah.
The pastor tries to be there for all the people all the time in every way. And the result is this, as they are trying to meet the impossible, their work and their ministry becomes now their priority. Mm. What happens next is they burn out. A lot of pastors, I will argue, are on the brink of burnout.
Yeah, a lot of the studies that show, especially recently over the last 5 years or so, and especially through
COVID.
The whole COVID, that there's a lot of burnout.
That's why many have left the ministry. That's why, according to some research, only 10% of all pastors who began ministry retire from ministry.
Which is absolutely unbelievably insane.
So there's burnout in pastors' life. The families are now neglected. And when families get neglected, here's the problem. Kids act out.
Yeah.
When family is neglected, the kids act out. Sometimes the pastor's spouse acts out. And now what happens is the kids become now sometimes even opposed to church life. Because what happens is this. Many adult children will look back and say, you know what? My dad gave his everything to the church and gave nothing to us. Mm. And so what begins to happen is they'll say things like, so we missed out. My dad didn't come to my ball games because he was doing a funeral. My dad didn't come to my piano recital because he was doing a wedding. My dad didn't, coach my little league football team because, he was busy every Wednesday night or whatever it may be. And so what happens is that these kids grow up into adults and they look back and they go, my dad, or in some cases my mom, gave everything to the church and gave nothing to us. And so that's, again, one reason why some of these kids act out. Another thing is this. Kids and spouses begin to search for their own identity. The pastor's family is one of the few families that is consistently defined by the parent's occupation.
Ooh.
I'll say that again.
Yeah.
The pastor's family is one of the few families that is consistently defined by the parent's occupation. Think of it like this. How many times have you heard this? Well, this is the accountant's daughter. Okay? Or how many times have you heard, this is the plumber's son.
Right.
You don't hear that. But I guarantee you, the moment a child or a spouse is being introduced who belongs to the pastor's family.
This is the pastor's kid.
This is the pastor's child. This is the pastor's wife. And so the point is, sometimes the pastor's wife or the pastor's child, they want to be known for their own accomplishments. Mm. They don't want to simply always be the pastor's son.
Yeah, they're not an accessory. They are an independent.
And maybe they want to be known for their athleticism or their music or their mechanical ability or their academic, accomplishments. Next, pastors' kids are expected to do no more than beyond their age or education.
So say that again.
Yeah. Pastors' kids are often expected to do more and know more than beyond their age or expectation. For example, how many pastors' kids are expected to do the public prayer for the football team? Even when I was a long, long time ago, land far, far away, when I was playing football, we had a pastor's son on our football team. Great guy. His name was Mike. Great guy, great athlete. But every time we had the team player, the coach would immediately say to Mike, lead us in prayer. And look, he did a great job. He was good with that. He did a great job. And we're glad that he did it. But here's the thing. Not every pastor's kid wants to pray in public.
All the time.
Every
the time.
Right, and be expected to. But again, how many, and I got this a lot 20 years ago, a lot of pastors' kids on 9/11/2001, many a teacher, God bless them, but many a teacher asked the pastor's kid to have a prayer in the classroom for the other kids and for the Twin Towers and for the people in New York and all that, which again, some pastors' kids are able to do that, but some aren't.
Well, like you said, these are great ministry opportunities, but when they're an expectation that's forced on a kid that maybe isn't comfortable with that.
Right.
Maybe, and that just, some people would be terrified to pray out loud. A lot of people listening right now
A lot of adults are
would panic if they walked into work and they said, "Hey, before staff meeting, I want you to lead our staff in prayer." Now, some people would love that, but some would not. Right?
Some are just not comfortable doing that.
Right, and that goes for pastors' kids as well.
Many pastors' kids are expected to know chapter and verse of certain areas of the Bible. I had one pastor's child say to me a few years ago, they were in a situation and they said, "Hey, where's that love chapter?" and they were expected to know. It's 1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah.
They were just expected to know. Many pastors' kids are expected to be amateur counselors. A lot of their peers will go to them because they're the pastor's kid and they should have the answer to their question. Their boyfriend broke up with them. Their girlfriend broke up with them. I'm thinking about, doing something dangerous. I'm thinking about taking my life, whatever. And that puts a lot of pressure on the pastor's kids simply because they are the child of the pastor. Many pastors' kids are expected to know advanced theological positions. Again, I've had pastors' kids say to me, "Hey, my next door neighbor, my dad's friend next door asked me about the book of Revelation, and is what's happening in our world based on the book of Revelation." And so, last of all, I'll say this. Most pastors' kids are placed in a stereotype, and thus they may not be included in certain social circles. And so to prove they can be just as cool as their friends or their peers, sometimes they will take risk. And many want to prove they can be just as bad as their peers. And they'll often go further than the others normally would. And so this appearance as the pastor's kid being more aggressive, more defiant, more oppositional begins to come to light.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, real quickly. What is if you attend church, and most of our listening audience, I believe, does, and you know the pastor, the pastor's family, and you know the pastor's kids, here's what I would say. Here's 7 things that your pastor's kids need from you who are listening, those who are in the congregation, those who are teaching Sunday school. Number 1, treat them like any other kid. They were not called into ministry.
Ooh.
Their parents were.
Oh, that is good and important.
They were not called into ministry. They might be. We don't know. But they were not called into ministry. Their parents were.
Yeah.
And so treat them like you would any other child. In other words, don't put more expectations on them. Don't put them in the guilt trip. Well, you're the pastor's child. How come you skip class or whatever? Treat them like you would any other kid. Number 2. Reduce your expectations. In other words, you don't expect the surgeon's kid to diagnose your appendicitis.
Right.
Okay? I mean, there's not a person listening who knows that, hey, little Johnny, his dad is the chief surgeon, so I got this pain on my right side. Little Johnny, do you think that's appendicitis? No, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Even though, that's the child of the surgeon. Number 3, just be a mentor to them. Sometimes the pastor's kids need to know that other people have their back.
Yeah.
That
absolutely.
other people, kind of know and are sympathetic to some degree with their situation. Be a mentor to them. Number 4, invite them and include them in your world. Invite them over, include them in your particular, events, whatever that may be. Number 6, pray for them. Pray for your pastor's family. Look, there's a lot that comes against your pastor's family. And if we're going to just kind of take that a step further, I will argue this, that your pastor's family is in the crosshairs of the satanic realm.
Yeah.
Your pastor's family is in the crosshairs of the satanic realm. You need to be in prayer for your pastor, prayer for his spouse, prayer for the children, because, again, they are being constantly bombarded. Because when you're going after the sheep, who do you shoot down?
You shoot the shepherd.
You shoot down the shepherd.
That's right.
You get rid of the shepherd so you can go to the sheep. So, again, pray for the pastor's family. Next, resist shaming and guilting the children or the spouse. In other words, don't be that one who says to the pastor's wife, "So where were you when we had our women's auxiliary?" Maybe she didn't feel like going. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. Maybe she had a aging mother she needed to take care of. Maybe she felt like just taking a personal Sabbath rest, or saying to the kids, shaming and guilting. The point simply is this, nobody listening here in our listening wants to be shamed or guilted. We don't.
Yep.
So we don't have, that's not a spiritual gift. Shaming and guilting the pastor's family is not a spiritual gift. And so resist shaming and guilting. Number 7, recognize their own identity. In other words, when you see your pastor's family, when you see your pastor's kids, this pastor's wife, whomever, recognize they have their own identity. Maybe the pastor's wife has her own vocation. Maybe she has her own interests. Maybe she has her own hobbies. Maybe the kids do as well. But recognize those and be okay with those and be willing to embrace and endorse those areas of their life. And maybe even encourage them in those areas, and maybe even just, be happy for them in those areas. If the pastor's wife got a promotion, at the local, plant, be excited for them. If the pastor's kids, got straight A's and made the honor roll, acknowledge that. Don't be the one who says, well, what else would you expect? They're supposed to do that. Well, maybe not. So the point is that the pastor's family is, I will argue, a very unique family in that sense of the word. And the kids are usually no different than anyone else. But because they are in a fish bowl, they're going to have expectations placed upon them that normally other children would not have. And so that's not fair to them. That's not fair to the rest of the congregation. So just be mindful, just be prayerful, just be sensitive, and recognize and realize that in most cases, these are great people, these are great kids, and they're just doing what they believe God wants them to do to the very best of their ability. And so just be sensitive and be in prayer.
Yeah, and behavior always tells a message. It communicates something. And so if you see a PK and you see behavior that you feel is outside of the bounds of what is normal for a kid their age, then I just want to encourage, and I'm going to run through them real quick, the things you just said. Treat them like any other kid. Reduce your expectations of them. Be a mentor to those kids.
Yeah.
Invite them into your world. Pray for them. Resist shaming or guilting children or the pastor's spouse. And, as always, recognize their own identity. I think those are 7 great things. I hope you wrote those down as you're driving, or you pulled off on the side of the road and wrote them down, because those are things that can absolutely transform a pastor's family. And then, how many times do people say, if you want to show me that you care about me, love my kids, right?
Exactly.
If you want your pastor to know you love him, take care of his kids and family.
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, for all the volunteers that are out there, for all the deacons, for all of the Sunday school teachers, for all the youth directors, I pray that you will hear this and embrace this and maybe begin to rethink some things.
Yep.
Yeah. For your sake and for the sake of the pastor and for the sake of your church family.
And know that we are praying for you. Hopefully your church is also praying for you. And today we just want to say thank you for all the incredible people that make this show possible, the people at Winter's Air, the people at Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats. To you, we want to say thank you to our listeners who have been faithful and are excited about this show and the things that are coming up. Do want to remind you that this is not a therapy session, and we're not able to speak into your situations directly, but we do want to encourage you to seek professional counsel, seek the counsel of your pastor, and find those in-depth answers to the questions that you have. But we do want this show to encourage you. We want to inspire you, and we want to see y'all make changes that lead to a stronger, healthier, happier family.